a lot of orthopedic things were managed non-operatively. So you saw people walking around with plaster casts, fiberglass casts, and things like that, because essentially what you do is set bones, put them back into place, and then treat them in a cast. And then they would heal not perfectly, but good enough that people would function pretty well. Everything evolves, and orthopedics has evolved. And truthfully, I almost never put on a cast anymore. So a lot of things we treat are surgical. But the truth of the matter is orthopedics is I do sports medicine. So sports medicine is as close to general orthopedics as you can do, because as a sports medicine specialist, I take care of kids who hurt their necks, their backs, their wrists, their shoulders, their elbows, their knees, their ankles. Now, it doesn't mean that I definitively take everything, but I have to evaluate all that. Orthopedics kind of has broken itself up into subspecialties again. In the beginning of my training, there wasn't as much subspecialization in orthopedics. In 2023, if you live in a metropolitan area, you're going to subspecialize in orthopedic surgery. So, there's the people who are traumatologists, people like Dr. Sahabian, for instance, who all he does is fix broken bones. That's what he does basically 4.5 to 5 days a week. He's in the operating room, almost every day. He has 1 day that he's in the office and sees his follow-ups. But as a traumatologist, he doesn't get to know his patients, right? He's on call, someone comes in, they're in a car accident, they break their femur, you go to the emergency room, I got a broken femur, Dr. Sabian's on call, he's gonna fix it. So the patients, that's a kind of a difficult situation because the patients don't know you as a physician, so they don't really trust you. They don't know if you're good or bad or whatever. And you don't know them. Right? You don't know if they're a reliable patient, or do they have poor health habits, are they bad diabetic, maybe they're not a great candidate for surgery, but you have to make all these decisions on the fly. And he does he does surgery in the upper arm, pelvis, he doesn't do spine surgery, lower extremities. And so his is a very heavy operative subspecialty. Orthopedic surgeons also handle spine surgery. So I have partners like Dr. Chiapetta and Dr. McDonald who are spine surgeons. That's all they do is spine. They take care of patients with back pain and neck pain, and that's it. So they're in the office, and then they operate a lot of times electively, but as spine surgeons in a location where we have a level 1 trauma center, they also take spine trauma calls. So spine is very specialized. If you do spine, generally you don't do anything else because it's such a super specialized subspecialty of orthopedic surgery. There's hand surgery. So hand surgeons like Dr. Monica or Dr. Letty, you can be a hand surgeon and operate from the wrist down to the fingertips, or you can be a hand and upper extremity specialist and operate from the shoulder all the way down to the hand. And that depends on what kind of practice you want to have. Now, hand surgeons, they also have their call because not only they have to take hand call, because as a sports medicine surgeon, I honestly don't remember all the parts of the hand, and I can't remember. No one wants to be operating on their hand, trust me. But they want Dr. Letty, Dr. Monica because that's their expertise. So not only do they have to take general ortho call, but they also have to take hand call. So people put their hands in a wood chipper, they get their hands caught in a conveyor belt. Those are emergencies. You have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go to the hospital and fix their manual hand. That's part of the deal if you become a hand surgeon. But there's a lot of elective surgery, carpal tunnel problems, and then they have elbow problems and stuff like that. So that's elective. So there's hand. There's foot and ankle, and a lot of people think of, you hear about podiatrists, and podiatrists do their style of foot and ankle surgery, but orthopedic surgery also has foot and ankle specialists. And they operate on, basically below the knee, sort of the ankle all the way to the toes. You have sports medicine specialists, and again, like I said, sports medicine, you find out with sports medicine, a lot of what we do in sports medicine are arthroscopic surgery. So as opposed to making big incisions and exposing everything, a lot of what I basically do like ACL reconstructions. I do 1 or 2 or 3 a week, and it's all done arthroscopically. I do shoulder surgery arthroscopically. So I still do some open cases, but you have to like arthroscopy, and I can tell you, like training orthopedic residents, an arthroscope is like a camera that's the size of a pencil, right? and you can put it into a joint, like into your shoulder, into your knee, into your hip, and you can do work with other instruments that are also the size of a pencil. But you're not really physically seeing what you're doing. Your hands are here, you're looking up at the screen up there, and you're doing it that way. And some people are pretty good at it, and you can tell you some residents like, nah, you shouldn't do anything with arthroscopy. Like, it's just not in your skill set. That's okay, but it's kind of fun if you like it. So I like that about sports medicine. Also, what I like about sports medicine is that it is kind of still general orthopedic surgery. And then there's joint replacement surgery, which is one of the more popular subspecialties in orthopedics. Like somebody said, I do hip and knee replacement, because that's really what it comes down to. And you hear all about people getting total knees and total hips and partial knee replacements, and it's really like total joint surgery has put orthopedics on the map, because a hip replacement is one of the most effective surgeries in all of medicine. It's probably the best surgery in orthopedic surgery. Like if you have a grandmother who has an arthritic hip, she says, I'm getting a hip replacement, it's a home run. She's gonna do great, she's gonna love it, like 99% of the time. When I was a resident, hip replacements were done, patients would come in the night before, they'd get their surgery done the next morning, and they'd stay in the hospital for 10 days. In 2023, we do hip replacements in our surgery center. You come in the morning, get your hip replacement, go home for lunch. And that's the way it is. So I've been in practice for my son's 26, so I'm 26 years old now, or 26 years in practice. So things have changed a lot, and it's very gratifying. These are people who say, like, I can't walk a block. I can't, it's hard for me to go out, shopping. Next thing you know, they get their replacement, they can walk as far as they want, or their knee replacement. So again, the fact that it's become outpatient surgery makes it even a little bit more attractive. Because like as a sports medicine physician, I rarely go to the hospital, which is great for me because I don't really want to go to the hospital. I do my work in an outpatient surgery center, which is actually on the third floor of my office. So I don't have to deal with emergencies. I don't have to deal with delays, because when you're in an outpatient surgery center, things are built for efficiency, and there's nothing unexpected. It's scheduled, this is what you're gonna do, surgeons say it takes me 2 hours to do this, it takes me 1 hour to do that, 3 hours to this, so you know when you're gonna be there, and it's a great day. Like, I love being in my surgery center. And for most orthopedic surgeons, surgery is the fun part of what we do. I think everybody likes surgery. If you don't like surgery, you shouldn't be an orthopedic surgeon, right? Because there's a lot of things you can do that are not. But to do surgery, you have to see patients. What people don't realize about orthopedics is that for the majority of orthopedic surgeons, they probably spend more time in the office than they do in the OR. A typical orthopedic surgeon is in the office 3 days a week and in the OR 2 days a week. Now, if you're a very, very busy joint surgeon, it may be the other way around. You may be in the office 2 days a week and do total joints 3 days a week. But let's talk about my specialty, sports medicine. I mean, if you're an athlete and you have a tennis elbow, right? Because you play tennis, although I never see tennis players with tennis elbow. I see golfers with tennis elbow. I don't do surgery on tennis elbow, like nobody does surgery on tennis elbow. But you have to treat them when you have to make the diagnosis. You have to then do their treatment, which is usually physical therapy, right? So my practice has physical therapy in our office, but we send a lot of patients to PT. I have runners who have stress fractures of the tibia or stress reactions of the tibia. So I have a high school athlete who's never run before and decides, I'm gonna go off the cross country team this year. And all of a sudden, within 7 days, they're running 40 or 50 miles a week. Well, their legs can't handle that, and they get stress fractures. I'm not operating on those, but I'm walking them through, saying, well, you should have been training all summer. You should have been ramping up your mileage gradually. So that, in sports medicine, there's so much more of it is non-operative than operative. There's a lot of injuries that we treat, non-operatively anyway. Like everyone thinks, you dislocate your shoulder, right? So let's say a football player who's, the second game of the season dislocates his shoulder. The answer isn't to operate on him. The answer is to pop his shoulder back in, which is really easy. And then have him do rehab and get him back on the field in like 4 weeks, so he's playing again. Now, he may play again, his shoulder may never come out again. He never gets an operation. But there's a high likelihood that his shoulder will be unstable, and at the end of the season, I'll do surgery to fix it. But it doesn't mean I'm doing it right away, and I'm hoping that I can never not have to operate on a person, because most people are kind of better off if they don't have that surgery. So, you have to understand that from an orthopedic standpoint, don't think of it as just surgery. I will tell you, it's a very labor-intense lifestyle. you know, we're at Robert Wood Johnson, we are, it's a level 1 trauma center. So even, I take trauma call like once every 6 nights. So like 2 weekends ago, or not, a few weekends ago, I was on call for the weekends. I was on call Saturday and Sunday. And I sit home and I wait for my pager, my phone to go off. And the residents tell me today we have a hip fracture, a broken femur, a broken tibia. And that's how I spend my Saturday and Sunday, fixing broken bones, just on call. But also I can be asleep at 2 in the morning and somebody get hit by a car and have an open tibia fracture with a compartment syndrome. Well, that's an orthopedic emergency. Like I have to get up, get out of bed, and have to go operate on that patient probably for 2 hours. I have to go home, take a shower, and go back and see 35 patients, you know, be awake and alert. So, you know, if you're afraid of it, if you don't like getting up at night and working in the middle of the night, I wouldn't necessarily recommend orthopedic surgery as your subspecialty of choice. Now, as you can move on into your career, you can have built such a busy elective practice that maybe you can get off the call schedule, but it's not really that feasible in too many places. I have to drink every once in a while because my voice goes bad very quickly for some reason. But I think, you know, orthopedics, I always say when I was a medical student, I kind of went to medical school wanting to be an orthopedic surgeon, so I'm biased from that standpoint. But I remember when I finally got through my boring first 2 years of medical school and got to go to the hospital, it always seemed like the orthopedic doctors were the happiest ones around. Like they're always laughing and joking and going into each other's room and watching each other do surgery and stuff like that. And I do think, like in general, it's a really fun specialty because your patients get better, right? Like, you know, if you treat somebody with diabetes, you never cure diabetes, right? You just treat diabetes. And there are a lot of doctors who want that long-term relationship with their patients. If I do ACL surgery on a high school athlete and they get better in 6 months and they go back and play sports, I never want to see them again. Because I see them again, it's because something wrong with the surgery that I did. Unless they hurt their other knee, then I'll have to come back, which unfortunately happens more often than you think. But that's a big difference about orthopedics. There's almost nothing in orthopedics that you want to treat longitudinally. We want somebody to come in with a musculoskeletal complaint. We want to give them an injection. We want to send them physical therapy. We want to teach them home exercises. We want to do surgery on them. But we want to get them better and say goodbye. And that's it, you're done. That's all there is to it. So, and the other, I left out one specialty of orthopedic surgery that's really important, and that's pediatric orthopedics. So there are orthopedic surgeons who only take care of kids. Now, there's a lot of the subspecialties that I talked about take care of kids as well. Like I do sports medicine and I do surgery on kids in 8th grade. And our hand surgeons do hand deformities in kids who are like, you know, little babies. But pediatric orthopedics, they do scoliosis surgery, they do cerebral palsy, they do spina bifida. So you see a lot of kids with neurologic disorders. But pediatric orthopedics, again, is a subspecialty into itself. Like if you do pediatric orthopedics, you don't operate on adults. Your office has kids coming in all the time, and that's what you do. So that's a really big one. So that's kind of what life of an orthopedic surgeon is. I think if you practice in a metropolitan area like we are here in central New Jersey, you tend to be a subspecialist. But let's say you choose to practice in central or western Massachusetts, where there's really not a lot of people. There's not a lot of hospitals. You're not going to trip over a hospital every 5 miles, right? There's probably one hospital, another one's like 50 miles away. So one of my actually resident colleagues, he finished our program, did a sports medicine fellowship, and this is why I said Western Massachusetts. He went out to Western Massachusetts, and for a period of time, he was the only orthopedic surgeon in the area, the only one. So he did everything. He did hip replacement, knee replacement, shoulder surgery, knee surgery. Luckily with the training, like when you leave training, you should be a good general orthopedic surgeon. And patient expectations in the rural areas are honestly a little bit different. They're like, thank God there's a doctor here, because otherwise they have to drive all the way to Boston to find somebody, and that's a long way away. So they were glad that they had Dr. Zoni there to take care of him. He did a great job. But that's rare. Like not so many people who grow up in a metropolitan area and choose to go practice in a rural area. So for most people in our residency program, almost all the residents will finish their residency, which is 5 years long, and and then they'll go to a subspecialty fellowship, and whatever they find that they like, that's another year, and then you start your practice. So if you want to be an orthopedic surgeon, you start making money when you're about 30 years old. It's a long time. And that's hard on some people. Like as a residency program director, I've talked several of our residents off the shelf, off the ledge, because they're like, all their friends, their lives are taking off. They're about like 25, 26-year-old. They're making money, they're buying cars. They're working, their residents are working 80 hours a week. They don't get a lot of vacation, and they're not really going to go into practice for another 5 or 6 years. That's when their career starts. So you have to commit to that. There's no shortcuts. You can't be like a superstar orthopedic resident and graduate in 2 years. It takes 5 years. And you're probably going to have to do a fellowship, so it's another 6 years. So, but it's all worth it because it's a great specialty. I mean, I really do love what I do. There's nothing else I would ever do. When I was in medical school, I said, if I don't match orthopedics, I'm quitting. I'm not going to be any other doctor. I wasn't anything else I would do. Lucky I got in because it's not that easy to get in. So I'll stop now just to ask any questions about it. That was a very kind of brief overview of orthopedic surgery. Any specific questions about the subspecialty? You saw an orthopedic surgery.
I did indeed. Bimalleolar fracture.
That's why she doesn't wear a cast.
I was curious about, in a specialty like ID, right? You're seeing a lot of very rapid change to the field because a lot of new drugs are being introduced to the market really quickly. Pathogens change pretty rapidly. Technologies change rapidly. And so you're really in a constant state of learning. Would you say that orthopedic surgery is similar? I feel like technology
Absolutely, yeah. There's no specialty in medicine where technology isn't like advancing things for you. Again, if you think about the years that I've been in practice, the way joint replacements went from a 10-day in-hospital stay to an outpatient surgery, that's all technologically related. Arthroscopic things that we used to have to do, like when I was a resident, a lot of the sports medicine surgery that I do on shoulders, there was no such thing as an arthroscopic pancreas repair. Now, 50% of the pancreas repairs I do are arthroscopic. So it's always changing. And I know if any of you heard or listened to my lecture that I did when I was to that M1's about anatomy. I mean, when I was a medical student, nobody ever talked about an MPFL reconstruction, which is a medial patellofemoral ligament reconstruction for people who were currently dislocated or patellolaterally. I don't even think anyone cared that there was an MPFL, if you want to know the truth. And here we are in 2023, and the surgical treatment of choice for patella instability is MPFL reconstruction. So there's an operation that didn't even exist when I was a resident. Is now the gold standard. So it never stops. I mean, and I say that like when I talk to people that aren't doctors, you have to continually keep up with what's going on in medicine. If you pump gas for a living, you don't go home and read how to pump gas better. You just go to work, go home, drink beers, and pump gas the next day. But if you're an orthopedic surgeon, if you're an ID doctor, if you're a family medicine doctor, you're reading medical journals, you're going to educational meetings, you never stop learning. If you decide you're going to stop learning, you should quit because you're burned out and it's time to stop. So, I mean, for us, Robert Wood Johnson, we're all in private practice, but we teach residents, so they kind of keep us on their toes. They make us. It's not we like what we do, but the resident, if you're working in private, I actually did work in private practice for 2 years in California before I moved back to New Jersey. And I realized what it was like being in a non-academic setting. It would be very easy to fall into a rut and say, this is what would work for me, it works well, and I'm just going to keep on doing it until I retire. But when you come back to an academic setting, it doesn't stop. Anything else? All right, so now I want to talk about the match, or getting into orthopedics, because I think that actually was my big plan for today, because I think it's important to hear about this as a first-year medical student. So undergrads, if you're thinking you want to be an orthopedic resident someday, this can be just as scary for you. Orthopedics is extremely difficult to match. I went to medical school, and I know any doctors in my family. I didn't know anything about medicine. I was actually a chemical engineer as an undergrad. So I just went to medical school, said, well, go to medical school, you get studying, you choose your residency, and you just do what you want to do. Well, I found out a little late in the game that orthopedics was very competitive. And not everybody who wants to be an orthopedic surgeon gets to be an orthopedic surgeon, just like not everyone who's an undergrad gets to go to medical school, right? So you have this, life is a big pyramid. You start at high school, and you go to college, you go to medical school, you go to residency, you go to fellowship, and then you go to practice. So, people get kind of weeded out as time goes on. But in orthopedics, like in the last few years, more than 40% of the people that applied to orthopedics didn't match. So that's a lot. It seems you're getting close to half. So that's kind of a drag if you think about it. You put all that effort in medical school, and then you can't do the subspecialty that you want to do. So, and I don't think that's going to change. I can't really explain why over the last few years we've seen more applicants to orthopedic surgery. It may be that, the annual median income of orthopedic surgeons is pretty high compared to a lot of other subspecialties, but I would hope that you're not in this for the money, because if you're in it for the money, you're making a big mistake. It's not, there's a lot of extra hours. Your hourly wage isn't as high as you think. But it's just, I think people like it. They like a lot of the things I just talked about, the thing about getting people better. People like to work with their hands. Right? People talk about, what do we use in orthopedic surgery? We use drills and hammers and saws. It's like doing carpentry on the human body, right? It really is. It's not cool. So maybe that's why people want to do it. I don't know, but it's become increasingly competitive. So I think, you have to make yourself a competitive candidate for residency. And that really starts from the very beginning of medical school. Because if you look at your medical school education, let's say you decide you want to go into family medicine, the second most common complaint that a patient has when they go see their family medicine doctor is a musculoskeletal complaint. The element of education that family medicine physicians feel the least educated in is musculoskeletal medicine. Like, you guys don't learn about musculoskeletal. Like, does anybody in your medical school, unless you do an ortho rotation, no one's ever going to teach you about tennis elbow. But you're going to go home, you could be an OB-GYN doctor, and you're going to be at a party, and your aunt is going to say, hey, my elbow hurts. What do you think that is? And you say, well, I don't know, I deliver babies. Like, leave me alone. But they think you know everything, right? I mean, my family asked me about, like, kidney practice. So I don't know. Stop asking these questions. So you kind of go back to your medical school knowledge base. But you don't get musculoskeletal medicine. So I think you have to say, like, well, I'm interested in orthopedics, and I know it's really competitive, so I'm going to do what I can do to learn as much as I can and make sure, number one, that this is what I want to do, and number two, give myself the best chance of getting in. So you got to do both things. It's not just making sure you get in. You have to make sure that this is what you want to do. So what I've always encouraged medical students to do is, number one, I'm just going to start off with how our department works. On Monday mornings, we have Orthopaedic Fracture Conference at 7:30, and it's in the auditorium in the Medical Education Building. We also have it on Zoom, which I'm against Zoom lectures, but I'm getting old, and I guess I'm getting old-fashioned. But I do think in-person lectures are better. That's why I'm here today rather than talking to you via Zoom. The way Fracture Conference works is that the residents take care of a lot of fractures through the week. Some of them they just put a splint on and say go to the office. Some of them they operate on. So every Monday morning they present all the cases to the other residents and faculty. And the faculty asks them all kinds of questions. So, why did you do this? Why did you do that? They ask them what are the criteria for treating this operatively versus non-operatively? Now, as a first-year medical student, a lot of this goes over your head. So if I told you, I have a convoluted distal radius fracture with 15 degrees of apex dorsal angulation and loss of inclination, you're like, what the hell is he talking about, right? All it is a broken wrist. That's what it is. Now, what do you do with a broken wrist? Well, if you set it, if you put it back into place and put it in a splint, you can put it in a splint and say, well, that's a pretty good position. We're going to treat that in a cast. Or you can try to put it back in a position that won't go back. So then you have to say, well, we're going to operate on it, we're going to fix it with plates and screws. And during fracture conference, the residents explained why this was operated on why it was treated closed, and they have to know all those criteria. But as a medical student, no one's gonna, if you come, no one's gonna ask you any questions. Like, I promise you, you're not gonna ask any questions, so don't be afraid. But you're gonna learn orthopedic jargon. Like, at some point, you're gonna say, oh, I know what he means by dorsal angulation, or I know what he means by loss of inclination, because, I mean, they must treat, like, literally 15 wrist fractures a week. Like, it gets boring. Like, for me, I was like, oh, another wrist fracture, I can't take it anymore. So the hand guys, they get all excited. So I think going to fracture conferences is a good thing. And the residents are all there, and after fracture conference, there's a little time to mill around. And you can actually get to meet some of the orthopedic residents, and I think that's a good idea. Because the orthopedic residents, they're the ones who just went through the process. Like, I went through the process so long ago that probably what my experience as a medical student applying to orthopedics is borderline irrelevant to what's going on in 2023. All these residents just did it like a few years ago. They can tell you what it's really like. So it's good to kind of make friends with the orthopedic residents. And by going to fracture conference on a regular basis, you'll get to meet, one or two of them. And I will tell you, like, one good thing about our residency program is that residents are very welcoming to medical students. So, they like to talk to you, they like to talk about their experiences, they want to help you. So you really should take advantage of that opportunity. On Thursday mornings, we have grand rounds. Grand rounds is when, I would tell you that 80% of the time it's a topic that's assigned to a resident, and they give a presentation. It's usually a case-based presentation. So they may talk about rotator cuff tears. They'll show like 2 or 3 cases of patients with rotator cuff tears. They'll show how it was treated. They'll give a lecture on rotator cuff tears. These are the indications for non-operative management. These are indications for surgery. They start off with the basics of anatomy. So as medical students, well, I get the anatomy part, that's good. But when people start talking about, well, I did a margin convergence on this supraspinatus tear, then you're like, it's way over your head, but that's okay. Because when you're a third-year student and you're doing a rotator cuff tear with, Dr. Monica, you're like, oh, I remember margin convergence from grand rounds when I was a first-year student. Is you really going to go? There's a lot of different topics. But I'm saying, like, you're going to, again, learn orthopedic lingo, because no matter what specialty you do, there's like a lingo, there's a jargon that everybody talks. The earlier you learn that, and it becomes part of your language, the better you're going to be going forward. So I do think those 2 conferences, that's, again, it's at 7:30 in the morning on Thursdays. It's in NEB in the auditorium, and just being there and watching is a good thing. And then after conference, you grab one of the residents. They all wear long white coats. You say, "Excuse me, can I just ask you a question?" And you can ask them a question about what you saw. Like, maybe you'll remember something from anatomy that is pertinent about the lecture they gave you or something. Just talk to them every once in a while. So those are 2 really good opportunities. Now, the Orthopedic Surgery Interest Group, starting 2 years ago, I think it was Peter Philtis and a couple of other people, did an amazing job setting up opportunities for all of you to get to the office with some of the faculty once in a while, and get to the OR with some of the faculty once in a while. And we have like a list, and you sign up for it, and this is your day. And you're usually seeing trauma or total joints or spine surgery, because that's in-hospital stuff. When you get later on in your medical school career, we'll get you into the surgery center and stuff like that. So that's that's a great opportunity to just experience the subspecialty. Dr. Cott, Ryan Cott, and Dr. McFarland have done a great job with I forget what they call it, summer immersion program. But towards the end of first year, you get to go to the office a couple days a week, go to the OR a couple days a week. It's almost like a week of really intense orthopedic surgery. They have lectures at nighttime. They do a journal club with Dr. Buckley. It's gotten tremendous feedback. And I think, again, you're at the end of your first year and saying, after that week, if you didn't like that week, then get out of orthopedics. That means you don't like it that much. But it's a great experience. So those are the things that I think, as your first year student, you gain some exposure to what you do. What I used to tell you is that regardless of all that stuff, the most important thing is you do really well on part 1 of the board. So if you have your choice of studying and getting good grades or going to see an ACL reconstruction, study and get good grades. But you guys are all pass-fail, so if you don't pass, then come on, right? So your grades really don't matter that much, except it does, apparently you guys can get ranked AOA based on what your grades are in the hidden back room, so that's helpful. And then I used to say, what we used to do is we used to screen the boards for the applicants. So after the end of your second year, you took part in one of the boards. And truthfully, to get in orthopedics, you probably had to be in the upper, quartile of medical students to have a shot at getting into orthopedic surgery. And that really hasn't changed. But now part one of the boards is passed down. So why study for the boards? I'm not kidding. I don't know what the right answer is. But why would you study for part? You can't pass part one. Yeah, you got to study, but you don't study that hard because you don't need to get a 260. All you need to get is a P and not get an F, right? So don't waste your time. I mean, that's my opinion. And I don't, but the problem is now you don't have part one to compare yourself to everybody else. So at the end of your third year, you take part two. And now your part two score is all you got. And if you don't do well on part two, there's not a part three. It's like people did poorly in part one, so crap. Like I'm gonna study really hard in part two, and they went from like the 30th percentile to the 80th percentile. They saved themselves. You can't save yourself in part. There's nothing after part two. So you better do well on part two, I'll tell you that. And I'm not actually interesting because in our residency, we don't teach for tests. Like the residents take the orthopedic training exam every year, and we have some residents who get in the 97th percentile. We have residents who get in the 30th percentile. As long as they're gonna pass their orthopedic boards, honestly, I don't care how they're doing the test, because I don't think being a good test taker makes you a good doctor. But to get into orthopedics, boards were really, really critical. So I used to kind of, at this point in time, I'd say, that's what I would say in the first 2 years, just study your brains out and take, do really well on boards. Because if you don't do that, you have almost no chance. Like there was a time, like I will tell you, like the board scores go, I've seen people get board scores like as high as 270 or something like that, which is really high. But we used to like set a filter for the boards at around 235. So if your board scores are under 235, we didn't download your application. And so our residency program has 3 spots. And I'm just gonna go backwards 2 years. For the 3 spots that we match every year, we used to get 600 applications. There's no way our faculty are going through 600 applications. Like we don't have enough time, we have practices. So we would set the boards at a number and knock it down to 300. And then we would divide up the 300 applications and we would interview 50 people for interviews. So out of 600 people who applied to Robert Wood Johnson, only 50 people got interviews for the 3 spots. Now there's we'll talk about what's going on in that later on in the talk, but that's changing things a lot. So you still need to do well in medical school. I think getting AOA is an indication you're getting good grades, so that's kind of helpful. I think unfortunately, the way things are transpiring, research is becoming a big part of orthopedics in terms of the orthopedic match. And you do have, at the end of your first year, this is your last summer off, by the way. Like after the end of your first year, there's no more summer vacation. Like you work all year round. But what you should be doing in your summer vacation is doing research. You can do research here at Robert Wood, you can go to Columbia, you can go to USC, you can go to UCLA, you go wherever you want, but do some research if you think you want to go more orthopedics. Because as we've lost the ability to use boards as a screen, we're trying to say, well, how interested are these people in orthopedics? And everyone believes that doing research expresses your interest in orthopedics, which really isn't true. Because the majority of people who go into orthopedic surgery go into private practice, and they're really never going to do research again. Like I'm a clinician scientist, I do basic science, I do clinical research, and I like it. And I'm not even like a hardcore research guy. But since the majority of people are going to private practice, why are we ramming research down their throats? It's so we can separate them from one from the other. It's almost like a rite of passage, and it's almost unfair. But I'm sorry, that's the way it is. So you do your research the first, in between your first and second year. But what it does is it introduces you to orthopedics. You learn the scientific method. You may meet some faculty members who will be your mentors, kind of go to bat for you when it comes time to apply for orthopedics. So you have to spend your summer between first and second year doing research, and that's all there is to it. So you do that, you finish your second year, you take your boards and you get your P, and now you're into third year, right? Third year is when you get to do your clinical years, and that's, I think they actually give you grades as a third year now. So I think you can get like a high pass, honors, pass, low pass, and fail. If you want to go into orthopedics, you got to get a high pass or honors in surgery and medicine. They're like the 2 big ones. Then there's psych and OB/GYN and Peds. You got to at least get a pass, but you probably need to get you're not getting good grades because, again, I'm telling you, orthopedics is competitive and everyone's getting grades. So you need to do well in your clinical years. You probably should do surgery a little early so you find out if you like the surgical lifestyle. Because, you know, one of the things about surgery is like when you operate on somebody, they're your patient 24/7. Like it never changes. You know, if my patient has a complication after surgery, even though I take call every 6 nights, the rest is just call time. Like right now, my patient will go off and say, the patient operated on last week has pus pouring out of their knee. Then I want to shoot myself because now I feel, you know, I feel bad that I have a complication. Because complications take years off your life. I mean, it really, I hate complications. And every surgeon should and does hate complications. But when you're doing elective surgery on people, it's, you know, it's really bad. But again, you have to be prepared to do that. But you know, so you need to see that as part of the surgical lifestyle. As the school has allowed the third-year students to do an orthopedic rotation, I would recommend doing that. We don't really pay a ton of attention to you as faculty members, honestly. Well, the residents do a lot of the teaching. It's really more for you to get the experience of orthopedics and learn what it's like and make sure you actually like it. So that's how you kind of get through your third year. And towards the latter end of your third year, you're going to start saying, well, I do want to do orthopedics. So now what's next is fourth year, right? And in fourth year, you're obviously going to do an orthopedic sub-I, like you're going to be like an orthopedic resident. And you're also going to do at least 2, preferably 3 away rotations. So you're going to kind of go to different institutions where you would think you would like to match. What would make you want to match somewhere? You might want to go somewhere because they have a super high-powered research program and you want to do academic medicine when you graduate. You might want to go somewhere in Southern California because you want to live in a sunny place. Or maybe your grandmother lives there and you can live there for free during a 4-week rotation because it's expensive. You gotta fly there, you gotta find a place to live. It's a place you don't know anything about. So doing a rotation somewhere, you know, where you have some support is actually a really helpful thing. You may have a fiance or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you know you're getting married, and you decide, we want to settle down in the Northeast. And you might as well do all your away electives in the Northeast, because doing a rotation in California doesn't help you if that's not your goal. But if you have a wide open opportunity, I'll go anywhere in the country, I just want to do orthopedics. You're better off doing a away rotation somewhere else, showing that I'm not like tied to New Jersey. Because a bunch of you are probably like grew up in New Jersey, went to Rutgers, and then Rutgers Medical School. Like, doesn't everyone leave New Jersey, right? So it's you know, that is part of how you kind of plan your away electives. Now you can look at yourself also as what time am I a competitive student? Because everyone has heard about Hospital for Special Surgery, right? They say it's one of the best orthopedic departments in the country. So if you want to go there, you better be like a superstar student, like middle of, you know, students are median, you know, they're not going to get into HSS unless their father works there. So should you do an away rotation at HSS if you're not a superstar? Probably not, because realistically, you can go spend more weeks there, and you can see all the stuff they do, and you can learn a lot, but they're not going to take you. And it's just the reality of the world. Like, I'm just trying to be, if I'm not blunt, if I kind of sugarcoat this, it's not worth your time. So and there's all different kinds of students, but the problem that you all are facing now is that you don't know where you stand because you're scheduling your 4th year electives before you've taken part 2 of the boards. So you don't know if you got a 267 or a 227. The 267 person go anywhere they want. The 227 person may not even get 5 interviews for orthopedic residency. So, you know, that's the way it is. So I don't know how to counsel people other than being real, like you should be looking at comparing yourself to your peers in medical school for the first couple of years and say, is it likely that I'm going to do really well on the boards? Am I considered a superstar student? So what has happened as a result is that now students are saying, well, what can I do to separate myself apart from my classmates? I'm going to do a research year. So now medical school becomes 5 years. So you do your 1st and 2nd year, you do your 3rd year, and then you leave Robert Wood and you go to Columbia or you go to Thomas Jefferson, you go to UCLA, and you do an entire year of research there in the orthopedic department. Why are you doing that? To generate a CV that has 10 papers and 15 abstracts and 2 book chapters, right? And now you kind of think you're separating yourself away from everybody else. So going back a few years ago, the students that I called the bubble students, the ones who took part in one of the boards and got, 230 or 235, like, well, I'm not really that, competitive. I'm gonna do research here, and that kind of pushed them over the hump. But now we see like the kids who have like amazing scores are also doing research here. So it's mind-boggling, but I've seen it happen to the point where I'm telling you, probably at least 50%, if not more than medical students do a research year. So I'm sorry to tell you that, but depending on how the next few years pan out, a lot of you may be doing a fifth year of medical school, which will be a research year. And I don't recommend doing it here because we know you, number one, so we're already going to go back for you. But you need as many people as possible to go back for you. So you got to go somewhere else and find another mentor, another supporter who's going to push you through the application process. All right. So that's the way things have been going. Now, what has changed things dramatically over the last year was our first year doing it. There's now something called signaling. So when you apply for orthopedic surgery as a medical student, you get to signal 30 programs. So let me go back one step. Prior to signaling, the typical student applied to between 50 and 75 orthopedic residency spots. And out of their 50 applications, they got 20 interviews if they were lucky. A lot of students got 10 or less. And if you don't get there's a saying like if you don't have 10 interviews or 9 interviews, your chances of matching go way down and all this kind of stuff. So what was before the pandemic, you applied and you had to go on interviews. And you had to get in a plane, like if you applied to Chicago, you had to go to Chicago. Well, the problem is like the University of Chicago interviews the same day as the University of Tennessee. So then you have to say, well, where do I go? You can't go to both. You can't be in both places at one time. But now with the pandemic, we weren't allowed to do in-person interviews. So all the interviews were done on Zoom. So now you could do University of Tennessee in the morning and the University of Chicago in the afternoon. So the students who were, again, the superstar students, they were like hoarding the interviews. They had like a ton of interviews. And there were other people who were good candidates but weren't getting as many interviews. So now we do something called signaling. So as a medical student, you can say, these are the 30 programs I would like to go to the most. So now, like when we screen our applications, the first screen is, did you signal Rutgers, Robert Johnson? And if you did, then we're gonna take a look at application. If you didn't signal us, we're not looking at your application. I don't care. Just throw it in the garbage. Because if you're not your top 30, I don't want you. That's all there is to it. And a lot of programs, there's very few programs that will interview somebody who hasn't signaled their program. So what it does is, even though I tell you last year, I told the students, don't apply to more than 30 programs. Nobody's gonna interview. They all apply to 50 programs. They did it anyway, because you're so insecure. Like everyone's telling you, you are. Like, I'm standing here telling you this is really hard. So what are you gonna do? Like, you're like, he's an idiot. I'm applying to 50. I don't know what he says. I'm doing it, because this is my future, right? And I would have done the same thing sitting in your seat. Like, I guarantee you, I would have done the same thing. So, but what you're gonna find is don't argue with the data. After 2 or 3 years of signaling, you're gonna see that you don't get interviews at places that you don't signal. So then, people aren't gonna have to apply to 75 places and get, 30 interview offers. They're gonna apply to 30 places and get, 15 interview offers. And there's gonna be more interviews for the group. So maybe getting interviews will become a little bit easier in the ensuing years. And we are making a move back to in-person. There's no orthopedic surgeon who wants to choose their residents by Zoom interview. I mean, it's ridiculous. You sit in your office, you make one of these fancy backgrounds, or you put your diplomas on the wall, or you put your guitar in the back corner, or your lead saxophone, or whatever. Something to kind of make you look cool. And then and you're on Zoom doing that. And so what's that in the back? That's a big saxophone. Let me see you play. Like, hey, we've seen that on like Zoom interview. When you come in person, you see body language, you get to meet people for real. Like, we have a resident, Matt Deal, who's one of our PGY3s now. I remember interviewing Matt, looking at his picture, like, look at this short little stocky guy. Matt's this big, tall, strapping guy. It's like, I had no idea that's what he looked like, but it shows like the misperception. But we all would like to see everybody. And I would think as medical students, you guys should want to do in-person interviews. Because like, what we made, like, during the pandemic, we had a professional photographer, videographer come in We made this like Robert Wood Johnson Rutgers Orthopaedic video. Like the drones flying over to Brunswick and interviews with faculty, interviews with residents, and so the video was like 15 minutes long or something. You can see it, things on our website. I was like, that's it, that's what you learned about Robert Wood. Like if you live in Chicago, like, oh, I watched the video, they look like pretty cool guys. Like, don't go there. But then you get there and we're a bunch of dorks, right? It's like, I can't believe this. But so you should want to go because it's 5 years of your life residency. You want to be somewhere where you feel like you fit in, where there's a lot of camaraderie, where there's a lot of research opportunities, where the faculty are nice, where the faculty are hard-ass, whatever you're looking for. You're going to learn that in person a lot better than you're going to learn via Zoom interviews. So I think it goes both ways, and I'm a big advocate of in-person interviews. Now, I've been, criticized as being old-fashioned. I got, one of the deans said to me, like, what is it about you orthopedic surgeons that you have to do in-person interviews? Like, everyone else does it that way. Why can't you use it? Because we've got to let these people operate on our patients for the next 5 years. So you don't have to live with them for 5 years, I do. And I want to get to know them and make sure that I can take them for 5 years. And I mean, we're lucky. Like, orthopedic candidates are great. You're all smart, you're all ambitious, you work hard. I mean, there's very few like bad apples in the pile. But if it was that easy, you would just take the application, throw them down the stairs, and take the bottom 3 and just take those 3 and be done, right? Go back to work and see patients, but we don't do that. We try to make, if you see the orthopedic residency of Robert Wood, it's very cohesive and it's very collegial. And I think the reason it's that way is because the way we work the selection process. So I can, make it sound funny, but in the end, the residents are like the face of our practices. They're the first responders for our patients in the emergency room. They have to do a good job to take care of those patients because it can have an impact on how we manage them after the fact. And if the patients are happy being taken care of by our residents, they're usually happy being taken care of by us. If they had a bad experience in the hospital or a bad experience in the office, it affects the way they perceive us as faculty or as their doctor. And they want to go somewhere else. I'm not going to Robert Wood. First doctor I met was like, was mean to me or hurt me or whatever. And then, so then they go somewhere else, and that's not bad for business. But, we have a great, and most residencies are that way. When you look at residencies, you can look like we're 3 residents per year. It's a 5-year residency, so we have 15 people. You can't hide when there's 15 residents. Like, there's a lot of work to do, and if you're lazy, you're going to stand out. You can't do your own thing. You got to be part of the team. You go to NYU where they have something like 12 residents a year. So that's 12 times 5 is 60. You can hide there. Like you can kind of do your own thing, kind of kiss up to the faculty and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to be a team player, and that's okay too. Now NYU has a great reputation, right? And some people like that. Like some people don't want to be part of the team. They don't want to hang out with the group all the time. They just want to do their work, study, get smart, learn to be a research, and go home and do whatever they do when they go home. Here it's a little different. So that's another one of the big things like in-person interviews. Like you want to see the person on the program that doesn't match you. And there's not one best orthopedic residency because people who come, there's residencies who have there's very strong clinic. Like we always say at Rutgers, the residents get to operate early and often. So as PGY2s, you're first assisting in surgery, and by the time you're done with the rotation, you're actually doing some of the operations skin to skin. There's other residencies where as a PGY2, you barely touch the scalpel, and you just watch. You don't start really operating until you're PGY3. Some people like that. Some people are like, I need to be taught, I want my hand held, and all this kind of stuff. And other places are like, just go get the work done and do it right. You learn, kind of learn by trial by fire. And people thrive in different environments. So that's why you can't say like, this is the best residency in the country. Because it's the best residency in the country for the 5 or the 7 or the 10 people that are there. But there's another place that's the best residency for 2 people. There's residencies that have 2 residents per year. And they love it there. And we had Casey Ambergano was an outstanding medical student at this school, went to Union Memorial down in Baltimore. I mean, it's like 2 residents per year. He loves it there. It's not some high-powered residency. He's learning everything. And I'm sure he's doing a great job. He's a great medical student. We would have liked to have him here. But that's where he chose to go. And it's probably the right place for him. So don't get so bent up on like, oh, I gotta go. You gotta go to the place where you're gonna learn to be a really good orthopedic surgeon, have a fun time doing it, and then go out and have a great career after that. So those are the things that you go through the years, you start thinking about what am I looking for in life? Do I want to be an academic medicine? Do I want to be in private practice? Do I want to take care of the sports team? No, and so all those things come into play as you go through the process. But you know, you do your, so you've done your away rotations, going interviews, and then, you know, you're collecting letters of recommendation. So the way it works now is we have, we'll have universal offer day on November 13th. So we're gonna start on October probably 10th or something. We'll download all the applications. We'll start the screen by who signaled us. If there's less than 300 applications, we'll just look at them all. If there's more than 300, we'll set a screen on the Part 2 boards, and that'll be that. One thing that's happened is DOs are now competitive for MD residencies because allopathic and osteopathic residents will sit for the same board of orthopedic surgery exam. There used to be two separate boards. You're like, well, I don't want to take a DO exam. It doesn't matter anymore. They all take the same one. So last year, for the first time ever, we interviewed 5 DO candidates for our residency because they had great board scores, they were smart, they had great letters of recommendation. But in the past, you know, they would have to sit for another board. So now they each take our board. So it doesn't matter anymore. So actually, that's another reason why there's more and more people applying to orthopedics. So you signal, you take your interviews, you get letter, while you're on these away rotations and all these things, and while you're doing research here and while you're other things, you meet faculty member that you get to know and you feel like, oh, you know, I think Dr. Gatt likes me. I'm gonna ask him to let me write me a letter of recommendation. If you think I don't like you, I like everybody, but if you think I don't like you, don't ask me for a letter of recommendation because I'm not gonna write you a letter. And it's hard because think about it, like, there's some faculty members you get to know pretty well. Let's say you say, well, I'm gonna go do an away rotation at NYU because I would love to live in the city. And I hear that's a great program. So you go there and you do a 4-week rotation. In 4 weeks, you have to make a relationship with a faculty member and ask him to write, him or her to write you a letter. Is that easy? No, it's not easy at all. So you have to kind of feel yourself out. We do a lot of coaching on that when you get into your 4th year. Like we assign faculty mentors to every student applying to orthopedics. We meet with you before you start your away rotations. We coach you on how to succeed in those rotations. And like I said, the best thing you do is get to know the residents because they just went through the system. And what you really want to get to do is you want to get to know the junior residents. Like, don't make friends with the chief residents because you're M1s. When you get to M3s and M4s, they're gone. They're out of here. Like, they won't be there to talk to you. Like, who's our PGY2s now? Like Jared's saying, right? He's gonna be a chief when you guys are 4. So you might as well get to know Jared. He's gonna be a boss, but he's gonna help you a lot more. But so I always say, like, get to meet the 2s and 3s because the 4s and the 5s will be gone when you guys are M4s. That's what you need to know, and they will help you a lot. So I don't know what's good. I think it used to be, this talk used to be very easy before signaling and before they changed part 1 of the boards to Pascal. It wasn't a pleasant talk to give because you all left here feeling kind of bad. But I think things are better, but they're still not easy. And I don't know how to make them easy. There's no way to make them easy. If you're not up to the challenge, then you should probably get out, unfortunately. It's just not easy. So it's a commitment, you know, it's like I said, I was a chemical engineer, and the engineering students were like, you know, you had to struggle to get a B. And then some of the liberal arts students were like not doing anything about their paper 2 nights before the end of the semester and getting the A's. And this is not fair, but it's just life. That's what it is. If you don't want to struggle, go on family medicine, you know, and then you can match anywhere you want to go. It's that easy. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. I'm just saying that, you know, there's a gazillion family medicine residency spots. They don't even fill all the spots around the country. But in orthopedics, we get to pick from the cream of the crop because 40% of you don't even get an orthopedics anymore. So it is what it is. It's just, that's the way it is. And I hope I don't sound cocky because I'm not. I tell the resident, you know, this is, you know, it's a privilege to be an orthopedic resident. If you match in orthopedics, you better consider yourself lucky. You know, you get lucky because you worked hard and you earned it. But you have to, there's a lot of people that I've seen go through the system who I thought were great candidates and never matched. And they have to choose another specialty or something. So, you gotta just commit from day one. The hardest students that have counseling are the ones who come up to me and M3, and they did their surgery rotation, did 2 weeks ortho. Man, ortho is really cool. I think I want to do that. And they've done nothing until that day. And I was like, well, what are we going to do now? Did you do any research? No, we don't know their board scores. And so I say, well, roll the dice and see what happens. But I'm telling you, it's all good that you're here as M1s, because you got to start from day 1. That's why we give this lecture so early. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to answer questions. Don't sign. Because the NRP is going to be like the happiest. It's so great. Yeah.
What would you recommend someone searching for a research position where they can make like a real quality contribution to whatever project that is?
So, it depends. Like, if you do summer research, it's hard. What you have to kind of accept the fact is that you're going to get involved in a project, and in August or September, when you go back to class, it's not over. Because how much research gets done in 2 months? Nothing, really. If you're really lucky and you find a project that's kind of in its tail end, it's a short, nice, neatly packaged project, theoretically, you could wrap something up by the end of the summer. But the truth of the matter is you're going to have to continue through. So you have to look for projects that are, look like they have good leadership, look like they have good planning and good direction. And that's probably the best advice.
If you had to choose between, say, a year of research and a really excellent letter from an ortho faculty member when you're looking at a residence application, or a resident application, which one is more important to you?
Really excellent letter. But they can be hard to come by. Because I think like this year, I don't know how many students are applying for it. It's a lot, because I've just finished writing all my letters, and my eyes are clear for doing that. I think there are like 12 or something like that. There's the best student in the class, and there's the not best student in the class. It doesn't mean the not best student isn't good. They're just not as good as the best, right? Like, that's life, right? People are better than that. And so somebody might call me and say, well, I have, student A and student B coming out of your school. Who would you pick? I gotta give them an answer. And the kind of the BS answer, oh, they're both really good, The guy says, I know they're both really good, but who would you pick? And I do the same, I could do the same thing if I was really like looking at carefully candidates. So that's kind of what happens. Like when we write our letters, and there's internal ranking systems too. Like, I would say that this person's going to be in the top 1/3 of our rank list, and this person's going to be in the middle 1/3 of our rank list. And, we try to leave it semi-vague, but we also try to be fair to each other. Because the last thing you want to do is send somebody a gut. I mean, there are students, and the faculty, including myself, not just me, will tell some students, you know what, this is just not the right specialty for you. I know this is what you want to do, but don't do it because you're not going to be happy. So those are few and far between, but they do exist. So I'm not going to take some kid who's like, I know doesn't have a future orthopedic surgeon and write a great letter, so he's going to be a great orthopedic resident, because he's not, or she's not. So you got to be honest. But the great letters, great letter is great. And I mean a great letter. Like I wrote a letter for one of our residents one time, and I said, who was applying for fellowship. The fellowship is competitive too, right? And I said, if this person wanted to practice in New Jersey, I would want them in my practice at my market. What more can I say? Like I want them working with me for the rest of their careers. I mean, that seals the deal right there. But how many people write that often? That's not enough. Like, oh, he's such a hard worker, great work ethic, he tells good jokes, he'll be blessed to work with for 5 years, you'll love teaching them. And this was like all the things, but every now and then you get a letter that's just like, you know that this person just gets it. We always I even put that on, that this person gets it, gets the big picture. But you don't know if you're going to get that letter from somebody. I always tell you, even if you're on pediatrics and a doctor from pediatrics says, when you apply for residency, I don't care what you apply for, I want to write you a letter, you take that letter. Because we all write a lot of letters, and we write letters for students that we really like, and we write letters for students we like, and ones that we're like, we'll write the letter. But if a faculty goes out of their way to want to write a letter, they're writing you like a great letter. So take it, and it'll be a good one. Probably your best letter.
Follow-up question.
Okay.
What qualities in your mind make a medical student particularly valuable as a potential ortho resident?
Let me just check one thing. Yeah, call. I'm blowing up there for a minute. I don't think I'm gonna call. I'm not on call, so can't do anything more. So I think, again, it goes down to the program that you have. But I think, it's kind of the cliche, it sounds cliche, but somebody who's a team player, somebody who is gonna, commit to excellence. Here's again another story. Like I had a resident like years ago, and he was a very mediocre resident. And we would have my annual meeting, like semi-annual evaluation meeting. And I'd say, yeah, you're doing okay. Your board score, your training scores to be higher, your surgical skills to be a little better. You're fine. Yeah, my life's been really tough the last year, but I am really going to commit. Next year, I'm going to be a much better resident. I said, really? You really are going to be a better resident? I said, you're married, you have 2 kids, you're starting a side business with your wife. You're not. I said, but it's okay. Like, you don't have to be the best resident ever to graduate from our program. Like, that's where you are. That's your choices in life. But when you're picking your medical student, you want to, I like to look for students who, they're going to give back to the program. Like, it's a give and take relationship teaching. Like, I like teaching people who want to learn. So if you come well prepared for cases, if you've read papers, if you watch, 5 videos on how to do the surgery, and you want to talk about it, then it gets to be more interactive. If I'm like spoon feeding you everything, like I'm bored, I'd rather talk about the Mets and how disappointing their year was because I don't have to think. But it makes teaching fun. So you want that student who's going to say, I have 5 years to learn as much about orthopedic surgery as I can. And during those 5 years, it's going to be the most important thing in my life. You're going to sacrifice for this. And the residency program is going to be a better place because you were there for 5 years. And that's kind of what I look for, If it's somebody that thinks, they've had such a great academic career as a medical student and, they deserve to get into orthopedics, I probably don't want them. Because I'm telling you, I don't care how good your record is, there are people with outstanding records who've never met. So you're not that good. Unless your dad's the chairman of a program or your mom's the chairman of a program, you have no guarantees of getting in. So that's what I look for. It's a lot of work. Residency is, again, like I said, it's a time of life when your friends who went into business and marketing, they're taking off. You're not even getting started.
At what point in your career during residency do you typically decide what you want to specialize in?
Everybody's different. So I went to medical school wanting to be a sports medicine orthopedic surgeon. And that's what I am right now. So that's kind of weird, but it's true. But I would tell you that most people have an idea what they might want to do, but then they get into residency and they see it in action. See, the problem is you don't get to see everything right away. So as a PGY1, you're an intern and you're like working in the emergency room and not really seeing the subspecialties in full bloom. Then you become a PGY2, you do peds ortho, you do hand, and you do peds hand and spine. Then you become a PGY3 and you do sports, trauma, and joints. So by that time, you've seen all the subspecialties of orthopedics. So towards the tail end of your PGY 2-3 year, you've seen everything, you better make a decision. Because in the end of your PGY 4 year, you start applying for fellowship, and this whole painful process starts all over again. Fellowship is way better. Like it's nowhere near as daunting as the residency process, but it's still competitive. So I would say by the end of your PGY 3 year, you should have a pretty good idea. Like one guy who came in and he's like, I want to be a spine surgeon. Right from day one, be a spine surgeon. So does his spine rotation and sees like 2 absolutely devastating complications. He's like, there's no way I'm doing spine. I can live with myself if that happened to my patient. Same way. He went into joints. So you don't really know. Like you have this preconceived notion of what it's like. And trust me, what you see and witness as a medical student, like if you do research in hand, you're gonna go into residency and I want to be a hand surgeon. But then you're gonna I sit down all day and operate these little tiny little hands. The joints, I get these hammers and all. That's way more fun than you do joints. That's just because the only thing you saw was hand, so it looks cool. But then you do it as a resident, you're like that's not as cool as the lung, because the other stuff is more fun for you. But everybody's different, right? That's the most important thing. Everybody's different. Every program's different. Every person is different. That's the, kind of the beauties of medicine. I always say, like, you guys are being like educated, talk about AI and all this kind of stuff. You know, like medicine is a science, but talk about the art of medicine. The art of medicine is what's so beautiful about it. You know, you can have two people with the same exact X-rays and the same exact diagnosis, and you'll tell this one person, you should have surgery, and you're going to do great, and you tell the other person, you're going to have physical therapy because you know they're going to do crappy after surgery. But if you can't make that call as an orthopedic surgeon, you're going to have a lot of unhappy patients. Like, there's a lot of patients, like, if I have a woman or a man who weighs 300 pounds and tears his ACL, and his big exercise is getting from the couch to the refrigerator to grab a beer, like, he doesn't need his ACL, right? If I do his ACL, he's probably get stiff, and he's not going to go out and play sports anyway. And if he gets a complication, I feel bad. But if I take care of a college athlete, the right answer is to do an ACL. That's the art of medicine. Same diagnosis, same X-ray, same MRI, but totally different patients. So that's why, you know, those things, what you see when you witness early on is not what you learn later with your experience. You got a question?
Yeah, so you said that you did a little bit of time in California, so how did you think that the program, like, so you said programs are different, how did you feel that the style of?
Well, I've been practicing in California. But I think, you know, nationwide, is again, like, here in the New York metropolitan area, you have a lot of people that are super specialized. Let's just say you decided I'm going to do my residency at the University of Nebraska, right? Well, Nebraska, like University of Nebraska is the only academic center in the whole state, right? So people actually come from all over Nebraska to have surgery and stuff like that. You see a much different kind of like patient population. I mean, you know, is the patient population in Nebraska really diverse? Is it diverse as what you see here in New Brunswick? Probably not. I mean, there's a lot of farmers out there. I mean, and again, it's just that's what life is like out there. Unless you're from, you know, somebody knows something about Nebraska that I don't know. But like I go out there with the Rutgers football team, and like you fly over cornfields, and you see these big farms, and you listen to the University of Nebraska residents present the research. They talk about tractor injuries. Like I don't see tractor injuries in New Brunswick, but I see gunshots and I see motor vehicle accidents from 287, right? So it's just different. So that's what the real difference is. But I think, again, you know, in orthopedics, it's because it's musculoskeletal medicine, it all applies. Like people get hurt jumping off their tractor, and people get hurt falling off the rock climbing wall, right? It's the same injury, it's just they got hurt in a different way. So you can treat them from a sports or a trauma standpoint. But it depends on the environment that you want to live in, right? I mean, I can tell you, I don't know if you've been to Lincoln, Nebraska, but there's not a lot to do there. There's a lot more to do here in New Brunswick than there is in Lincoln. That may be the kind of lifestyle you like. So that's probably more of it is about the environment outside the hospital. I mean, orthopedics is orthopedics. You know, some programs have like, take Newark compared to New Brunswick, for instance. Newark has an oncology service, and orthopedic oncology is a very, very, very fine subset of orthopedic surgery. We don't do orthopedic oncology here. We refer it to Newark or Memorial Sloan Kettering or Philadelphia. But if you do your residency in Newark, you're on an ortho-oncology service. But how many residents go into orthopedic oncology? Like in my entire time as a residency program director, we've had one resident go into oncology. And I've been here for a long time. So it's not very common. So if you're thinking, well, I think I would like to do ortho-oncology, you might want to go to a program where you get to do ortho-oncology. But that's like, other than that, there's not much difference. You know, some places don't have a very strong pediatric orthopedic department. We have a strong one, so you get our residency pediatric orthopedics through their entire residency. Some residencies just farm their residents out to a pediatric hospital for 6 months, and that's the only pediatric orthopedic store that they get. So if you think you might like taking care of kids, you might want to go somewhere with more peds. But again, that's the kind of coaching that we do when you pass second year. you're in third year, we start mentoring you about where you want to do your way levels. I think a lot of it has to do with the environment outside of hospital. How do you want to live your life when you have some free time? Which you don't have that much of, but.
So going back to your previous answer about talking about like different niches of orthopedic, how like everyone's different. Maybe as an undergrad student who wants to look at orthopedics, do you think shadowing someone would help them find their space?
I don't think it will help you find your space as much as help you make sure that maybe orthopedics is something you'd be interested in. So I do think it's a reasonable thing to do. Again, we have opportunities for undergrads to work with the residents a little bit and things like that. I will tell you, like as undergrads, if you want to shadow orthopedic, any doctor, but especially as the fall is a terrible time to shadow because that's when we're looking at all the fourth year medical students. The springtime, kind of like the recruiting process is dead. And that's a good time to kind of latch onto an orthopedic, another doctor, and do some shadowing. And usually shadowing for a week is a reasonable amount of time. Like I'll do some shadowing with students. I'll say spend a day with me in the office, a day with me in the OR, spend a couple of days with the residents. Make sure you see like more of a broad swing. Because like spending time with me in my practice doesn't show you what it's like to be a resident. And being a resident is like, you gotta make it through that first. So you might want to see what being a resident is like. Because some people look at resident like, I don't want to be one. I don't want to take call every third night. And I don't want to be in up all night. Like, I mean, our residents, when they take call at Harvard Johnson, they barely sleep. You know, if you do dermatology residency, you get to sleep. There's not a lot of, no one calls you 2 in the morning for a dermatology emergency. So you get to sleep. And that's important to me. Don't laugh. I think that's important to people. It really is. Like, one of my best friends in medical school, you know, and I try not to be, you know, talk about like, everyone, when I was in medical school, it's like, oh, all the dumb jocks going to orthopedics, which was stupid because it wasn't really true. But this guy looked like the prototypical orthopedic. I was like, how, he said, I hate orthopedics. Like, who would ever want to do that? He became a pediatrician, you know, and again, he said, like, I don't want to do surgery. And I want to like get to know my patients and all this kind of stuff. So, doesn't, you know, all that's what I'm saying, everybody's different. But I think shadowing is a good idea. I think shadowing, but I would recommend shadowing some residents.
I have an additional comment to make on that, just from like an undergrad to medical student perspective. Like orthopedics or not, if you're not doing a significant amount of shadowing or clinical work, you're not going to get into med school to begin with. So.
Is that what it is? That's the way it is now?
Yeah.
Wow, that's good. I didn't know that when I was. Everything's more competitive, it's kind of crazy. Anything else? So I think what'll happen is, you know, for the M1 students, we'll see how the match plays out this year, because this will be our second year with signaling. So we have more data back, and we'll learn more about it, and we'll be able to give you better advice next year than we are giving the current students this year, because this is our first year. And a year after that, we'll be able to give you better advice, because we'll have 3 years of data to know where we stand. And we'll kind of learn how the system is going to play out, because everything's in evolution right now. And I don't think it's going to kind of settle down for another maybe 3 years, that we really know that things reach a steady state. And the thing we're all like kind of worried about is that they're going to make part 2 of the boards pass fail. Like, you should worry about it, that's what we're worried about. Because now we've lost another screening tool. But that's what they want. They don't want us to have screening tools. They want us to do holistic evaluations of the applications, that's honorable. Right now, I already did 2 surgeries today, and I have 35 patients to see tomorrow. And I don't feel like staying up till midnight looking at 500 applications. I cannot. I'm just being honest. And nobody does it. Come on, really. Think you put yourself, like fast forward and say, well, I want to, instead of hanging out with my wife and kids, I want to read 300 applications. I want to hang out with my wife and kids or your husband and kids. But it may go that way, so I don't know. But, you know, that's why, if it doesn't go that way 3 years from now, we'll have a new steady state and we'll be able to give you guys great advice that works well. So, like, for you as M1s, we'll be like, it'll be right in our wheelhouse. We'll know exactly what to tell you. Right now, we're kind of figuring it out all together. For undergrads, think that's good advice, you know. I went to Lafayette, and I started off my career, like I would have a Lafayette student shadow me for a week. You know, I usually would have like 3 or 4 of them sign up over the summer. And this one student, and I've always worked really hard, just in my, like I do my practice, I do sports coverage, I do research, I teach, all that kind of stuff. So this student from Lafayette comes and says, yeah, I definitely want to go to medical school. And after the week, she said, there's no way I want to do this. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, I want to get married. And I said, like, I don't want to work this hard. First, I said, well, look, like, not everybody works this hard, so don't let that scare you. So fast forward a few years later, I meet her, and she had become, instead of going to medical school, she became a physician assistant. And she was much, much happier. She said, like, you know, she was older, she was more mature. She wasn't married yet, actually. I don't know if she ever got married, honestly. She said that I just didn't want that the ultimate responsibility. Like, I like taking care of patients, I like the interaction. She was a surgical PA, she's like, I like assisting in surgery. But when I go home at night, like, I get to go home and like put my head on my pillow and I get to rest. You know, like when you're a surgeon, like, you know, you do a lot of surgery and you do A+ surgeries and you do A surgeries and you do B surgeries and B+ surgeries, you know. And when you get down into the B+ range, you wake up at 3 in the morning like, oh, I wish I had done a little bit better. Like, your brain doesn't turn off. And I'm like 60 years old now, and I still wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about the surgery I did last week. It never ends. When I stop feeling bad about it, or stop wishing I could have done a better job, that's when I'll quit. So it is a commitment that, you know, takes over, especially a surgical specialty, can take over your life. And it's gotten harder because, like, I carry a cell phone, which I can't tell you how many pages I got while I was talking to all of you, and I don't know how many are medically related. But when I first started, all there was a pager. So I had a whole bunch of partners. I was on call like every 6th night. The other 5 nights, nobody really could get a hold of me. The only person to get a hold of me was my partner who was on call because he had my house phone. Because I actually, you know, a lot of us didn't even carry cell phones. Now, it doesn't matter. I have a cell phone. So the trainers from Rutgers, the trainers from Ryder, the residents of Rutgers, they think I'm available 24/7. I was on vacation in Italy and I read 3 MRIs while I was in. When I was first started, MRIs came on a big sheet of film. So I couldn't read the MRI in Italy, it was in the United States. Now it's I can look at it on my phone. So everybody wants the answer in 1 hour. And that's the way, like, again, you have to commit to it. You say, I want to live that life. You know, you could be at your son's popcorn football game, and you have to, like, walk off into a shady area so you can look at MRI on your phone. And that's what I do. And I don't mind it, I'm not complaining. I'm saying make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. So as undergrads, you know, you know, some people are willing to do that, that's part of life. And other people say, I don't want to make that commitment, and it's okay. Become a PA or become a dermatologist, you know. And again, I'm not putting down dermatology. Dermatology is a great job, man, you know. Make a ton of money, don't work that hard. People love you because they look better after you see them. Get rid of rashes and stuff. If it's wet, dry, it's dry, wet. That's all I know with dermatology. But, you know, orthopedic surgeons like to make fun of other specialties. We all still get teased by all the other specialties. You know, because they're like, oh, you guys are glorified carpenters. Yeah, that's fine. Probably most of us aren't. All right. All good? Everybody walk out of here smiling.
Thank you so much.
Because again, orthopedics is the best specialty in the world.
Medical students, before you guys leave, we have an attendance sheet for you guys to fill out. Dr. Gatt, thank you so much for that
Sure.
very sobering